Masterminds have been around for a long time, right? But unless you had a bunch of extra income to throw at it, you couldn't be a part of it. Well, we wanted to solve that problem. And so we're bringing masterminds to you for free. Welcome to Mastermind for the Masses. All right. Welcome, everyone, to this week's Mastermind for the Masses. We're excited this week to have Joey Katz joining us. He's the Director of Member Experience, basically involved in customer experience in the healthcare industry. Joey, welcome. Anything else you want to add for your introduction?
No, I think you really hit it right on the head, Josh. I'm happy to be with my friends in technology today. I'm a student at the University of South Florida, working on my MBA in cybersecurity. So I have a lot of envy for what you guys do day in and day out. I have a lot of passion for the tech industry, and so I really appreciate you guys putting on this podcast so that you can help out some people like me.
Yeah, man, we're excited to be able to do that and have folks like you participate and also add your insights and values. So we're super excited. We were talking a little bit before we hit record, and you have listened to the episode, so we kind of kick things off with what's up this week. I'm going to kick it off this week because usually I throw it to somebody first. But for me, what's up this week? It actually was kind of just a moment of self-reflection. I was sitting there and I was thinking about this section actually, and what has been up this week, and how cool is it that we take time each week to really reflect on how the week's gone, what any challenges or successes may have been, and how we can benefit from that. So it's just another reason why I love what we're doing here with Mastermind for the Masses, because it lets us take a moment to kind of self-reflect and say, hey, this week was either a challenge or this week was pretty good, and kind of take stock for a moment. I think in this day and age, we're always running so much and so busy and focused on that efficiency and productivity, which is super important, which is why we all focus on it. But it's also nice to just take a moment sometimes and reflect. And I love the fact that this little part of our pod gets us to do that. So that's what happened for me this week as I was thinking about this.
I treat it almost like I have the same kind of joy for it, but for different reasons. I treat it with like subliminal accountability, right? Because like if I mentioned what happened last week and you guys ask about it and I like either didn't do it or something goes on, it kind of gives me that back end like voice in my head that makes sure that I actually commit to what I'm doing for the week.
Awesome. So let me ask you about last week. No. So what's up this week for you? Anything exciting?
I am doing everything that I should have been doing for the past year to get my house ready for rent. So I have the next couple of weeks off. I'm trying to kind of throw my head at the wall and like knock out a few things that I've just been putting off forever. And the goal of mine is to get into a new place and have this one completely rent ready for the next tenant. So I did my kitchen today. I'm going to be doing the bedrooms tomorrow. It's a nightmare, but it needed to be done.
So most people get a couple weeks off and maybe they're like Colby and chill out and play video games. Shan says, you know what? I'm going to remodel my house.
I mean, I play video games at night, so it goes hand in hand.
All right. Awesome. Colby, anything exciting this week?
Well, I'm not remodeling any house or preparing it for rent, but no, honestly, it was a pretty stock standard week and pretty stock standard week coming up to just still wrapping up training the couple of new guys that we have on the team. So still going through that. That's been fun. But yeah, no, other than that, just kind of getting back into the swing of things with the new year. Honestly, it's kind of weird how long it feels like it takes to get back into the swing of a full like work year, honestly, because I felt like there was such like almost like a nap between like November to December. It was a lot busier than last year was from November to December, but yeah, that's kind of it for me.
Isn't that interesting? The first part of the year really takes some ramp up time, and the end of the year seems to just speed up. It's year after year. You think you'd figure out a way to pace it, but it's just natural occurring.
Yeah, exactly.
And Joey, man, now it's your opportunity.
Yeah, I also like Shan. I view these as a piece of accountability, and we actually start in my my current workplace. We start all of our meetings like this. It's kind of like a way to segue into actual business, and kind of take a moment to recognize people as people, which I think is really important. So for me this week, not a whole lot. School has been kind of kicking my butt as of recent, and so I took last night. I stayed up a little bit later than I probably normally would, and knocked out the next couple of weeks of classwork. It's an online class, and so I'm feeling really good for the next couple of weeks. But as of today, maybe not so much.
Well, hey man, the grit and determination that online schooling takes. I mean, schooling in general, right? But I got a lot of my degrees through online education, and it's how it worked when I had a family and a full-time job. If you want to get it done, you got to figure that out, and it takes a lot of grit. So I'm impressed that you're grinding through it for sure. And
Absolutely.
you still took time out to join Mastermind for the Masses here, and I believe you brought kind of a question or a topic with you.
Yeah. And by the way, I wouldn't miss it for the world. I always appreciate these opportunities to speak with other folks and expand my mind and expand my skill set. And you had kind of touched on it earlier, that we, sometimes are just kind of in autopilot mode, and, taking the time to actually think about questions and topics and things that are relevant in business and the way that people interact with stuff, I think is hugely important. And so I've tried on my end to really take a pause when I get a question and not just fire out my pre-recorded answer. But yeah, for my topic today, I was hoping to speak to you guys a little bit about the omni-channel experience. And I know that you guys have seen it quite a different way than I have. I come from a background really in logistics and retail. I worked for America's largest retailer, and I worked for a lot of transportation companies and different things like that. And so I held a lot of operations leadership roles. And so I have noticed a drastic change in the business landscape. And I'm sure that you folks have as well, on your side of the business spectrum here. And so I was interested in kind of dissecting that with you guys and kind of walking through maybe some changes that you've seen, some different ways that it's kind of affected working styles and the way that you produce, products for clients, and just really like taking the time to pick you guys' brain on exactly what you've seen in the space.
Yeah. I mean, omnichannel obviously has changed quite a bit. When you're talking about us discussing that, and we can hit it from all angles, right? But are you thinking more from kind of the customer experience side of it, from the employee experience and the interactions, or I guess just so I make sure we address the topic you want in the right way, I just want a little clearer understanding maybe of that.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of a little bit of a connected conversation, and so I'm sure it'll bleed through subject to subject. But I think the main way that I've experienced it personally is through customer engagement, customer experience, and what that looks like as far as how we deliver our products to customers and how they receive them. And I think that also changes the way that we work too. So I'm sure that we'll kind of get into the differences there.
Yeah. So initial thoughts for me from omnichannel, and then I'd love to hear Shannon, Colby, and see their experiences as well. But for me, when I think about the omnichannel opportunity and providing those multiple ways for a customer to connect or interact with your business, I think there's always this question of scalability, and are you able to scale your operation? And if you create multiple channels and ways for people to connect and interact with your brand, obviously you need multiple people to be able to monitor and work in those areas. So, there was a shift for quite a while of, well, let's reduce those channels to a certain point. You'll see some IT support desks or something eliminate phone calls or something like that. But now with experience management really being at the forefront, managing that customer experience, employee experience, I think you're starting to see a little bit more of wanting to personalize those interactions. And so the omnichannel is, I guess, propagating more in a lot of spaces as well, because you want to give the customer or the employee, right, the opportunity to utilize the tools and the connection methods that they find to be most comfortable. And so you're able to still scale, but you're personalizing the experience. And so I think with the experience management part of it being the focus that a lot of businesses are starting to drive, I think we're starting to see a little more of that personalization of which channels people can use. Those are my initial thoughts. But Shan, with your businesses, right? I mean, I'm sure you have some insights onto omnichannel and the benefits or the challenges thereof.
Oh yeah, no, I actually love this topic because when I think of omnichannel, one, I think of marketing and communication for both. But I think of it as an absolute necessity and a standard. But that standard, it's funny how that is, because when you mentioned like getting away from it, like maybe 10 to 12 years ago, it was kind of like the focus was to eliminate confusion and like bring people like through one channel until experience. I feel like experience management is being like it's evolving now more than it ever has. And whenever that layer was introduced, and I know you spoke on like the IT help desk, but I'll let Colby speak more on that. But in terms of like my experience, like now whenever someone can connect with that business, chat with the business, or even make a purchase, whatever's more convenient for them ends up being a better experience. Now that like a lot of people confuse that with like obviously having, you know, if you're having 50 channels through your business and they're not really solidified and the experience isn't great, it can just cause confusion. But when you have that like experience management in it, the first thing I think with omnichannel is one, the way you can actually connect with the business, whether it's like directly through the chat, they can email you, they can message you on Instagram, they can message you on Facebook, or they can even call a number if you have an actual physical shop, or even just the support line. But the other way I think of it too is marketing. And that's what's changed. And that's where like the necessity steps in. So it's funny you bring up this topic because last night I was literally messing around with a new posting scheduler that I'm trying out for the brands, because it's to the point where whenever I'm producing content for my businesses, I have to kind of treat them each channel differently, right? Like my TikTok is my kind of safe haven for like testing out content and making stuff as organic as possible. And like there's kind of like less need and more forgiveness on like the professionality for like posting on TikTok, whereas like Instagram and Facebook, it's still a little bit more I don't like kind of like tightly wound when it comes to like coming off professional. So it's funny that each of these marketing approaches, they kind of like have their own certain segments and taste to them. That's where omnichannel really makes a difference, because I used to think that if you can nail one of those channels, you can do really great. But if you're talking about like scalability, I really think you need to be involved with as many as you can and understand the market for each of those omnichannel marketing methods. So, and even like to add to a layer of that, like email marketing too, as well. Like there's a certain, I feel like most people have in their mind like a promotional kind of idea whenever they're getting emails, right? Like they're expecting to see a great deal or a new product launch, so on and so forth. Whereas when they're stepping onto your Instagram or your TikTok, they're expecting to see like how the product works, or like testimonials from other customers, or even just like content that revolves around like the brand's messaging. So I think this is a really good topic for sure, because the same reflects towards an organization. Because in reality, like wherever you're working, you're generally working for a business structure, and omnichannel fits it fits in all different environments. So I'm interested to hear Colby's ideas on omnichannel for like the IT space.
Yeah, so I think you touched on something that's really critical. Is it's kind of like each channel should have a distinct advantage / purpose, because just having 5 of like the same type of channels that in terms of how someone would interface with them and get to you, it like if they were all similar and be one reason for using one over the other. And I think like that's the value add to the user customer that you're bringing, is the fact that it's a different way to interact with the people or person that you're going to interact with in a way that's more convenient to you, that has the items that you want to interface with at the forefront. So it's not just that there's tons of channels, it's that there's tons of valuable channels that do something different for you that the other ones don't. I think that's like really key. And I think that's a good point, because you want to have enough valuable channels that your business can support, to Josh's point, because having a really cool channel and a really cool way for someone to interact with, engage with your organization, and doesn't really matter if on the other side, the supporting end that is going to provide the support to the user or the customer, if they don't have enough resources to deliver on the vision of the product or / channel that you're using. And I think the balance of those is so critical, right? Because you want to put customer experience at the forefront, but it does require a significant amount of resource investment for a lot of businesses. And if you aren't willing or not able to provide that investment at the start when you're introducing that channel, you should probably table it, or at least taper the expectations to the users on what you're delivering. Because it could just really put a sour taste, right? Because I think, something that can happen in IT, right, is you offer a new way for someone to put in a ticket, right? And then the users are really excited. They're like, okay, great. Like, this is way faster. I can put the information I want. I can, put these screenshots in super quickly. Like, this is amazing, right? But what if there was an hour delay before a technician saw it in comparison with another ticket? Well, great. I mean, like, the experience at the beginning was great, but now when it comes to the actual work being done, it was delayed, and that's not a great experience. I guarantee you, in most situations, the person would prefer that their issue get resolved quicker than the experience of it inputting the ticket being better. And I think that's something that you really have to consider holistically when you're envisioning the amount of channels that are going into your organization and how you want people to interface with you. You got to think about beginning to end, right? Customer experience is not just how pretty something looks at the very beginning. It's really like at the end, and honestly, the final thing that they do with you is a lot of the times what lasts in their brain, because it's the final moment, and you want it to be something good and something where it's like, man, like, that was fantastic, right? And so yeah, I just think like you got to keep those elements in mind from a holistic perspective.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys brought up. Oh, sorry, Josh. I was just going to say, you guys brought up something that I hold really near and dear, which is, customer experience is kind of defined by the summation of all of the interactions that somebody has with a business. And so when you're adding in these different channels, like you guys had mentioned, you're adding different ways for consumers, for employees, for stakeholders to interact with the business. And it becomes equally as important as, you move across these different channels, and as you make different channels available to these folks, that the experience delivers on all avenues. A good example is we talk about, a lot of the many different ways that, companies engage employees, and the different ways that we have to communicate now. We use, text threads, Microsoft Teams, we text and things like that. If a company has a Facebook page, that's all well and good, but if it's not managed and ran correctly, does that add to the value? I would argue probably not. It would probably be better not to have a Facebook page at all.
Could be more damaging.
Yeah. I think that you guys really, really brought up some great points on that. Thank you.
Josh, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, I was listening to an audiobook on the way home, and it was talking about, a lot of places focus on a product and what it can deliver, as opposed to maybe the person or the target people that you're trying to address. And I think that the omni-channel really allows you to hone in on the individuals and, the preferences that they have to interact with your business or your organization. So I'm actually curious, Joey, how does that influence like your omni-channel approach, right? Like, do you do you take into, when you're talking experience management, there's obviously personas and profiles that get developed, and you probably do some journey mapping and all of those types of elements. So how does that factor into what you're doing with your omni-channel efforts?
I think that it causes us to, kind of strike a balance between treading very lightly and cautiously, wanting to maintain that very high quality of communication, whether it's to a patient, to a client, to an employee. And then also, striking that balance with being constantly innovative. I mean, history is littered with examples of businesses that failed to innovate. We think of the COVID-19 pandemic, where some of the most successful retailers in the world right now were the ones who are able to quickly capitalize on the fact that they needed to deliver goods and shopping experiences in completely different ways. And now we're set to enter an entirely new domain. We're set to enter a more experience-driven sales and shopping experience where everything's kind of connected. We think of businesses, and some larger car manufacturers, some larger electronic manufacturers. Apple, is one of them, where, like you guys had mentioned, the focus of the storefront is no longer on the product; it's on the community. It's on bringing people in to become part of this experience, to become part of this crowd. And I think that each new channel that we engage, I think that there's a tad bit of trepidation that, we're mindful of brand image. We're mindful of, our ability to deliver at that very high level. But I think that it's really incumbent upon us in business that if we wish to succeed going forward, that we continue to innovate and we continue to think, what's possible. I keep specifically, and this is kind of funny, but I keep a video saved on my phone, which was the first time that Burger King was the first fast food establishment to accept credit cards. And I keep it as a reminder, not just because it's funny to hear everybody's reactions to using credit cards at a fast food place, but I keep it as a reminder of just how much business can change over the span of 10 years, 15 years, and now even a year. We again, the COVID-19 pandemic really changed how businesses operate in the world. And you're seldom to find a business that isn't utilizing at least one or two channels, maybe more, to create this connected ecosystem. Now it's not enough that you can go and find a store online. Now you need your phone to connect with that store. So when you walk in, it knows you're there. It knows everything that you've been looking at. And in exchange, companies are getting a mass amount of data, which they're now able to leverage to predict how to best serve their clients. And so I think it's a transaction that, that is really mutually beneficial. I know, for instance, I really enjoy getting my paper towels delivered to my front door and not ever having to walk into a Walmart. And I don't think I'll ever go back.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people will.
Is that on auto replenish too? Because that's how we do it here.
Yeah.
every 6 weeks, it just shows up. We don't have to think about it.
I love the auto replenish feature. I think that I've personally become somebody who's a fan of having backstock in my life, and so I like to, after everything that happened with the world running out of toilet paper and whatnot, I want to make sure I'm well stocked up. I think that it's pretty incredible that what can be done from the home now. I think there's seldom something that I have to leave the house to do anymore, which is maybe to my detriment, but still interesting in business nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, thinking that through, right, and thinking, Colby, from the technology perspective, right? I'm just curious. Obviously, the big buzzword around technology and everything that's going on is AI, Gen AI, machine learning, whichever element of that you want to discuss. But how do you see that playing into the omni-channel support? Because you see a lot of chatbots and things like that you interact with at first level. And if done well, it can be great. But if it's done poorly, it can also frustrate you to no end. So what do you see the future of that looking like?
So I think there's a couple of really key things to keep in mind with integrating any sort of bot like chatbot into how someone would interact with your organization. And probably the biggest one is it should not be the primary way or the first way someone is interacting with your business, in my opinion. And I think that for a few reasons. One of them is those bots work really great for particular users or customers, depending on the situation. Like some people really like the fact that they can just quickly interface with the bot and the bot can direct them where they need to go, and they really enjoy that. But some people really, really hate interacting with a not like with that isn't a person. If it's a bot, they don't want to. They get really ticked off by it, and I think it can be dangerous depending on your organization and the sort of demographic that you're working with to have that as the sort of first thing that people are interacting with. It can kind of put a sour taste in their mouth. So I think that's one thing to consider, is just, is it the first method that someone would come into contact with, or at least have alternative starting points? I think is the big thing. Like have a different starting point that someone can interact with that is also easy to interact with, right? So in a help desk situation, someone can interact with a bot, say in Microsoft Teams easily, right? But they can still call the help desk line, right? They can still give you a call. And those two things are easy starting points for that person. And I think like having those two options is really important. And then I think it depends on the type of bot that you're using too, and if it's something where it's only utilizing information that is fed into it by the company, or if it's a sort of like ChatGPT integrated bot that has outside learning along with information that you supply it with that you want it to know and utilize within your company. Just because if it's only serving up sort of like FAQs, essentially, people can I don't know. I guess even in my experience, right, when I interact with a bot like that, it's kind of just like, oh, okay, well, so unless I meet your like cookie cutter example, it's like not helpful. And I would rather almost just talk to the person. And it's like if they instantly recognize the problem I'm like encountering and have a solution, great. Like, they're doing the same thing as the bot is. And I get that the company is trying to reduce, the manpower that's needed to assist that person. But from my perspective, it's a much more enjoyable experience just to interact with the person at that level, which again I think goes back to the point where you just need it. It should be an option. It just shouldn't be the only way that someone can interface with your company. But I do think that they can be extremely beneficial because the bots can interact with sort of features and automations that the company does in ways that really enhance the user experience and provide them with stuff that a normal person couldn't do at the speed at which the bot can. So I just think it really depends on how you integrate it with the company. It's just I think that those precautions do need to be kept at the forefront when you're thinking about integrating it with your business.
It's such an interesting point when you talk about, where does it add value? Where does it fit in? Where does it enhance the experience rather than detract from it? Shan, thinking back to something you said a little bit earlier with marketing, right? How do you ensure, from an omni-channel perspective, that you're not overloading the person that you're communicating with, or that you're, is it an opt-in option? Is it reducing something? Like, how do you ensure it doesn't become noise? Like, or an annoyance, to Colby's point, if it's not helpful?
Yeah, no, I think segments are huge for me, right? Like I segment my audience to where I can tell who's comfortable with highly engaging content, or like promotional type content that's kind of like delivering back and forth. So like, let's say, like, we all think of emails when you ask that question, right? Like, it's in the back of all of our minds. Like, how do you deal with customers who don't want 20 emails a day? Well, for me, part of it, or at least like the beginning step for that, is kind of like understanding your audience. So building out segments. Obviously, I can tell who out of my customers are buying the most often, who would benefit from the type of email I'm sending, whether or not it's like educational content, or if it's like promotional, like we're running a sale or something like that. I never just send to a direct audience, which is a whole nother topic, right? Like, know your audience, especially like on a post by post or campaign by campaign layer. Like, just because you understand your audience for a company doesn't mean you should throw every single campaign you come up with at them. So that is one approach. when it comes to like anything AI related, just to bounce back after the question that you asked, Colby, I go through the same. I have kind of the same mindset for that. So I was looking into introduce a bot that completely ingested all of my sales data. It ingested like a scrubbed down version of my customer data, and it kind of like it was able to tell you like you go to a store, hey, like, hey, what's your best selling product, or like what's the product like someone usually buys first, like for the customer who has no idea what they want, they just know they want it. They kind of have a method to chat with a bot who is going to know the most about my company when it comes to like getting answers quickly. Um, but the downside of that is like it's tough to introduce because I wouldn't want to promote it or make it a pop up or like kind of like shoot the bot into my customers' eyes like as soon as they hit the website or as soon as they signed up for our email newsletter. So I think we are in a weird time where all of us understands that AI is going to be the way moving forward, but there's still bad taste, especially when it comes to like chatbots that are still kind of living through
Yep.
everything else. So it's going to be a slow introduction for sure. But yeah,
I
long story
think I wanted to add this too. I think what's the missing piece with bots, I think that still needs to be solved, and it can be solved a decent bit with how you integrate it, but it's the problem of authenticity, because that's kind of why someone wants to interact with a person, right? It's because it's an authentic human experience and interaction,
Mhm.
and a machine just doesn't really provide that interaction at the level that is really optimal yet. And because of that, I think that's the reason why people try to avoid it. And so I think there are some interesting ways I think you can get around that without actually changing what the bot does. It's just kind of how it flows in the rhythm of the experience being provided to the customer, right?
Oh,
Like,
it's its own channel
yeah,
for sure.
exactly. Because like I think if like there's a situation I could see where it starts off with a person-to-person interaction, right? But then a bot can interject with information or like a certain like thing that provides value to the moment. And right, it's like it's enhancing the conversation. It isn't the only conversation being had. Yeah, so I just wanted to interject that.
Yep, 100%.
And no, I think super awesome like conversation around the customer perspective on omni-channel. One of the things I'm super passionate about is kind of that employee experience and how does the omni-channel impact that, right? Do we see it as a benefit to the employee experience that they have multiple? I mean, because you can look at it from two ways. One, they have multiple ways to interact with the organization that they serve, which can be a huge value add. But then if you flip it from that customer contact area, whether it's reaching out for a sales call, or support or any of those elements, now in a sense, possibly depending on your organization structure, we might be asking an individual to monitor multiple channels to complete the same task that they used to do in a single pane of glass. You know, do we, I guess, what are your guys' thoughts on, does an omni-channel environment improve or hurt or not affect the employee experience overall? Or is it just in how you apply it?
Mm. I'll go first if no one else wants to. I definitely think it's how you apply it for sure, because I've been in situations and I've felt the stress that an omni environment can provide to a worker. Like even just like literally as myself as an example, I've been in situations where I felt like I had to be like an arachnid with like a million different eyes, like looking at absolutely everything all at once, and that can be very difficult. And I think the reason it's important to keep that in mind is it's not necessarily you want your worker to have a great experience, right? But it's not just you want them to have a great experience. You also want to make sure that they're in the mindset and they have the capability of providing the best experience to your user or your customer as well, right? So the better headspace that they're in, the better. I mean, ideally, the better service that they could provide the person. And so I think as long as there are things that in a UI sense that help them integrate the channels into a single pane of glass again, then it can be very successful, or at least having some sort of alerts or notifications that allow them to keep track of things without needing to have it like physically in front of them all the time. Because I think like you can run into those issues where it can a note like a message can come through in a channel, but they didn't necessarily see the the red +1 thing on that channel saying, hey, there's a new message in here, right? And if that gets missed, like I alluded to earlier, it's if it can take an extra hour to get to the channel, then it's obviously the channel isn't providing its proper job. But at the same token, right, like it's like we've all discussed, like it's a great benefit to our customers, to our users, et cetera. So it's just about how you iterate it with your employees. So I think one, it's how you can implement a UI or at least a system or a set of processes that covers those potential issues that could arise. But two, I also think a lot of it actually ends up coming down to how you hire in the future, because you end up needing a much more flexible employee in that sort of environment. And the reason I say that is because you can obviously like have a person who's like very good at like text communication, right? They're really good at typing out messages to users, interacting with them over a text format, but maybe they don't really excel at talking to them over the phone or, in person, right? They may not have great interpersonal skills when it's like, literally and physically right next to each other. And that can be a big strain too, right? Because finding that almost like perfect person to fit that role is very difficult. But I do think that becomes increasingly more important in these environments where you have different ways for people to interact with your business. So you need to have a more well-rounded individual, or you need to, again, back to the resource point, employ more resources to sort of have more specialization behind the scenes when you're supporting those channels.
Shannon, Joey, I definitely want to hear your answer, but Colby, I think that our listeners are going to turn it into a drinking game every time you bring an analogy in. With your arachnid eyes, take a shot. Sorry, I couldn't pass it up. As soon as you said that, I was like, there's the analogy. Shot.
I thought we were going to make it.
Yeah, I know. He almost went the whole pod without it, but he squeezed it in.
I couldn't help it. Sorry.
Yeah. Again, Shan, Joey, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on how the omni-channel experience impacts employee.
Yeah, I first off, it's music to my ears to hear this as a topic of discussion on the podcast today, because I've kind of built my career on engaging employees. I've found that there is a certain way to engage folks in order to get a team of people that will really run through brick walls for you. And so I appreciate you bringing this to the table. With that being said, I think that at the root core of any employee, I think if you took a survey, I think that the majority would say that they are interested in, and it provides them some level of job satisfaction to provide a better experience for their client or their customer. I think that everybody wants to do that. And, we see time and time again with different businesses that don't put the customer first and end up having, large amounts of attrition. They end up having disengaged workforce. They end up not having internal promotions and having to hire from outside. And so I think that if it's rolled out in a way that is mutually beneficial to both the client and the employee, I think that is, huge. A good example that I have in my career is actually along the conversation of AI. When I worked for America's largest retailer, Walmart, they were rolling out a chatbot that was essentially a way for employees to ask any question that a customer would come to them in the store. And as you guys have probably heard, in the past, something that we had struggled with at Walmart was actually our ability to engage a customer and provide good customer service, teach people how to do that on the sales floor. And so now, by empowering our employees to be able to, simply open up a device and be able to say, hey, what aisle are the eggs? What time is our store closing on Thanksgiving? How can I better do my job? What are the closing procedures for a hurricane? What's the emergency contact for a gas spill at my fuel station? Empowering an employee to be able to make those decisions, I don't think is ever a bad thing. I think that people want to be able to act on their own accord, and they don't want to have to ask permission and always seek out a supervisor. And so I've seen, at least in my career so far, that there has been a fair balance, I would say, of focusing on how can I make my employee's job more efficient, but how can I also make my customer shopping experience more efficient? And I think if that balance strikes, roundabout equal, then I think that we have a safe environment to continue to grow in that space, without kind of ostracizing or kind of segmenting employees that maybe just don't fit that bill.
Yeah, it's good points. Shan, top that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, honestly, when you asked the question, like focused around like an employee's experience, I immediately shot to myself, like what makes a difference for me when it comes to omnichannel, and like how does it actually support or like build my experience in the company I'm working for. And for me, without being confusing, because again, we talked about this at the beginning of the pod, when you have multiple channels that kind of have their own responsibilities and goals for why you might be using them. They make sense and they're efficient. And of course, like, again, they're not confusing. I think that ultimately builds the entire customer experience or employee experience, because you could be working for a company that, is, huge, it's got 5,000 plus employees, or one that only has like 100. But if you have like a channel to where maybe like you have an idea, right? Like you want to submit an idea that the company could really like gain some impact from, but you don't want to put it in like your standard like text message chat or Teams chat where people are actually talking about business. Or like, let's say you have some feedback, right? Like you had a meeting that didn't go too well. You had some thoughts on how it could have been better. You want like an area to where you can kind of share that feedback again without interrupting like the day-to-day business, or like throwing it in a group chat where all of your other colleagues are there to kind of like ingest out of the blue, and it's really not its own like allocated spot for that. So I think like the businesses who are really like tackling omnichannel, but with Colby's approach to like making sure that they kind of tread lightly and make it sure it's like solidified and there's going to be a good experience with it. I think that's ultimately what like drives overall employee experience, because if you have a place that you're comfortable in the environment and you're comfortable with what you can share and where you can share it, that overall to me kind of just builds that experience.
Awesome. Well, Joey, how do we do talking and addressing omni-channel?
I think that everybody did really well. I know that this is a challenging subject because there's a tendency, I'm sure, for all of us to kind of stick to what we know, in some senses, and we grew up, a lot of us, just by judging by the demographic here, we grew up in kind of this awesome transformation from analog to digital, and so we've got to see exactly just how quickly this can change an entire society, and really the impact that it can have on the way that we do business. And today I am ordering toilet paper and paper towels from my couch and having it delivered, and tomorrow, what will the next thing be? Will I be going into a VR showroom and picking out the best brand of toilet paper? Can I feel it on my hand, and make sure that it's the right kind? I just don't know. And I think that this is just such an interesting topic, and I could blab on all day about it, because it's just something that I'm really passionate about in the space, and it's I appreciate you guys for talking about it.
Yeah, no, it's been really cool to explore. So, as we do, I'd love to get the final thoughts around the topic here. So, Shane, I'm going to kick it off with you, man. Final thoughts around omni-channel and the impact it has on, I guess, experience management is really what we were kind of talking about as a whole.
Yeah. Like Joey said, kind of COVID really changed the game for a lot of the ways that customers kind of experience or interact with a business. But I think that standard was already set. It just wasn't it wasn't fully like, it wasn't the only option until COVID hit, right? Because at the end of the day, you had to order paper towels from your couch because there was no other alternative. So with that point, I think understanding the omnichannel environment and adapting to it the best way you can with maintaining that or customer or employee experience is like the ultimate route to go. And you never really know kind of when that next like COVID event hit. So with all those businesses who did really build themselves up whenever the pandemic hit, it was because they were just prepared. And at the end of the day, they were innovative with omnichannel. That's at the end of the day, that's really all it took for them. So I think it's an important topic too, and I appreciate you, Joe, for bringing it on.
In short, don't be a Blockbuster.
Don't be a Blockbuster.
You know, that's exactly what I thought of because I used to work for Blockbuster actually during its prime.
I'm sorry, Josh.
No. You don't hurt my feelings. I just, this was when I was 18, so I was pretty much the counter guy. But that's exactly where my mind went. I mean, they were the creme de la creme of video rental, and they did not adapt. You know, even though they were probably prepared, to kind of your point a second ago, Shan, they weren't willing. And I think that's the other component that's so important, is because they did try, but they tried way too late to go to that whole blue box Blockbuster thing when Redbox had already done it. And then they tried to hop into the streaming world, but they just waited too long to pivot. And, that was to their detriment. But hey, it's kind of neat to say I worked at that place. So, Colby, final thoughts, sir?
Yeah, so I would just say in general, I think the kind of theme and my biggest takeaway is that whenever you're considering changes or implementing these types of channels into your business's ecosystem, that you have to be extremely thoughtful for how you're going about it. And I think you need to be able to zoom out and zoom in at the greatest level in each direction. And I think like when you're zooming all the way out, you just have to have a very clear picture of how things are all interacting with each other and not just on their own individual level as one channel. Like, because one channel could function great on its own, but it could be poisoning the rest of your ecosystem, so to speak, for another analogy for Josh. And I think similarly, though, it's extremely important that you can also get extremely granular with each of these channels and how they're functioning and how they impact both user and your employees' experiences, right? You need to think about it from both directions. So I think as long as you can zoom out and zoom in at that level with the changes that you're making, and you can think, yes, like this all makes sense and works well together, then I think it's probably a great change and something that you should push to and strive toward. And like, if it doesn't really fit what you're looking for, don't implement it. Like, you don't, just like I said at the beginning, more isn't always better. Making an addition isn't always positive. I think Joey mentioned that too. It can sometimes be a detriment to your business, to your brand, to your employees' morale, all those sorts of things. So I think it's just be very thoughtful and considerate and take your time. Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to add today, Joey?
No, I think that you guys have really covered everything. I think that, the world is quickly moving to a much more connected place, and data is becoming, the hottest commodity available in the market. And just like you guys had said, it's a lot of risk taking that, has to go on in order for businesses or professionals like us to succeed in these different arenas. But at the same time, the reward is sometimes very great, and I think that it's going to lead to a better experience for all of us over the long term. And I think, again, it's really a privilege to be part of this conversation and to again just share the ideas that you guys brought to the table today.
No, for sure. And just as a final thought from me, we care about personalizing your experience with this podcast. And, when we think about omni-channel, that's why we try to meet you where you are. So as I've said before, whether you listen on Amazon, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, wherever you want to actually get this content, it's out there. We'd love to hear from you on any of those platforms, whether you want to put in comments or send, let us know what you want to hear about. If you have topics or ideas, we'd love to talk about those as well. This has been really cool. It's a little different topic than we've addressed in some of the other ones. So it was neat to kind of talk practical application of some tools and strategies around experience management. And honestly, Joey, just appreciate you coming on, man. It was fantastic question, fantastic dialogue, and just a fantastic time.
Fantastic time. Yeah.
Totally.
Josh is a real gem for everybody listening. If you haven't worked at Blockbuster already, you're not gonna. So he has some experience that nobody else will ever.
Real diamond in the rough.
So keep that man protected.
It's a very badge of honor. But yeah, no, thanks, man. Thanks again, Joey, for being on today.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. And we will see you next time here on Mastermind for the Masses. Bye.